Welcome back to Language of the Soul, conversations on healing and growth. I'm Ben Umstead.
And I'm Martin Perkins.
And with us today is a special guest, Nichelle Owens. Hi, Nichelle.
Hi, Ben. Hi, Martin.
Hey there, Nichelle.
So Nichelle is an educator, a mother, a longtime student of Martin's with Language of the Soul and acupuncture. She's also one of the narrators of the audiobook edition for Language of the Soul, A Path of Simplicity. In the process of recording the audiobook, Nichelle came in to read the vignettes, the shorter pieces in the book. And then I actually read the chapters. Martin also did a few parts of the book himself, and he was the audio engineer. So today's episode of the podcast is going to be an exploration of Nichelle's experience, my experience, and Martin's experience creating the audiobook.
I'm the one today that's going to be sort of framing the questions. And the questions are largely centered around what was the healing and growth experience that you each had in being the voice talent? You know, what were your edges? What were your opportunities? What excited you about this? Nichelle, you and I have talked a little bit about what it meant, and I'd love for everyone to hear what prompted you.
Sure, I'm happy to share that. First, thank you both for the opportunity to be on this podcast. It's quite an honor, and I've enjoyed working with both of you. I have to say, Marty, I recall us ending an acupuncture session and you sharing with me about your book and your desire to turn it into an audiobook. And as I heard that, a whole bunch of previous experiences flooded my mind and my spirit. And I kept hearing from my time as a trainer and as a teacher, people say, your voice is so soothing. It's so calming. You can give bad news and I still don't feel bad about it. I've heard people say everything is going to be okay when you're sharing information. I think within that very week that you mentioned the audiobook, one of my current colleagues said, Nichelle, this is our first time working together, but your voice is so soothing. You should do an audiobook. And I'm like, wow, the universe is really guiding me on a path. I better step into it. And for those who know me, I'm pretty shy. I'm not always comfortable being in front. I do it for my work, but it's not my natural place. I like to listen and be in the background. So having the opportunity to push myself and do something that does expose a vulnerability, but still kept me in a safe space was very appealing to me. So when you shared that you were going to do the audiobook and I looked at you and I said, oh, well, if you need help, let me know. And then you just kind of looked at me like, for real? And we just took off from there. So I will say that this was not anything planned. It was just something that I think was supposed to happen, unbeknownst to me prior to that. But I'm glad that it did, and it was a great experience.
So what's fascinating to me is the surprise on my face wasn't so much that I wasn't surprised by the idea of you being the voice. I had already had it in my thoughts to ask you. And when I presented it to you, my surprise was in hearing you say in this really beautiful, wonderful, open-hearted way, a sense of excitement. My surprise was, wow, the synergy here is just, it just took off, and it felt really just exciting and wonderful that it really didn't require anything more than me just mentioning it to you, and then the universe and you just stepped into it, right? It was beautiful.
I mean, I will say you never asked. It was just, like you said, instantaneous. Sure, I'll do it. Marty
Right.
might need my help. Let me figure out how I can help.
Yeah.
Here I am.
I was so exuberantly happy at that moment. It was one of those beautiful serendipities of life. Ben, Nichelle spoke of safety and vulnerability in a way that I thought was just really well said, because it is a dance, right? Safety and vulnerability. And I'm curious, what was that dance like for you? Where were your edges around safety? What were your vulnerabilities?
There were definitely some edges there that I anticipated. I had worry around. I was anxious around. We had planned for quite some time that I would be narrating some aspect of the book. To set the scene a little bit for our listeners, you and I had been working on just the text of the book and preparing to publish a paperback of that for a year and a half.
Right.
I don't even recall the exact moment where you said to me, when we do the audiobook, I want you to be one of the voices. So this had been there. This was definitely our intent. Moving into the actual process of recording was really scary for me. I felt vulnerable because I had been quite often your cheerleader,
Right.
your guide in the process of the text. Ben, what do you think of this presentation, of this idea, of this practice, of this wording? So there was a pragmatism being an editor there. And I was familiar with the words, familiar with the intention and power of the words, the softness of the words, the warm embrace. And I knew that I wanted to bring that. Sitting down and doing it DIY, figuring out the space that we were going to be in, all of these things, my mind, and I really want to make this distinction, my mind was like, I got to be a part of figuring that out. I got to be a part of transitioning Martin's office into a makeshift recording studio. And that was taking a lot of energy and a lot of intention away from using my voice as a vessel for that very soulful wisdom. Ultimately, I got there through being vulnerable, through accepting that I was uncomfortable. There was definitely some frustration on my part in the initial recordings in terms of mouth sounds, sounds in the environment. So there are all these aspects that I had to get comfortable with in terms of how I could show up from this space within. And after a few hours of going back and forth after that first day and then coming back into the second day of recording, there was an acceptance that this was going to be a challenge. And once I accepted that, that's when the adventure of it really settled in for me. And it was just more about tapping into that creative wisdom, knowing, like Nichelle, you talk about people going, you should record an audiobook. Your voice is so soothing. It's so calming. I've had those experiences as well. I've loved reading aloud. If there's any opportunity to read to family or friends, share that experience, it's so good. I love recording voice messages to friends when they're in different time zones. Often that's a way that I like to communicate, and some friends like to communicate with me. So it wasn't about being shy about my voice. It was about stepping into the power of my voice, not as a facilitator, not as a producer, but as a creative entity in this purest form.
When I first entered into the creative process around the book, the notion of voice was really around the content of the book for me. What did it mean to put my voice, my work into the world in the form of a book? It was a whole nother challenge that arose for me as I literally heard my voice in those few sections of the book. It allowed me a whole nother challenge. And so I really can appreciate your sense of, oh, I thought the challenge would be around the voice, but really it was around other facets. For me, the truth was, in listening countless times as we each read sections of the book to each other in the editing process, I knew early on in hearing you speak the book, I knew I wanted you to be the narrator. That was really never a question for me, right? I kind of like, wow, Ben's perfect for this. In both of you, I was gifted by the universe, not just with people who I genuinely like and care about, but people whose voices, in my eyes, were professional quality voices. So I was like, wow, the universe is gifting me with like really amazing voices. So yeah, there's just such a sense of gratitude I have for that facet of it. In essence, in many ways along the way, one facet of learning to be accepting of my own voice was initially the book itself, and then the audiobook, and now it's hearing my voice on presentations like this. Each time I hear my voice on a podcast, it takes that moment of first going, who's that? And then, oh, that's me. That's what I sound like. And that sort of disconnect between how we think we sound and how we actually sound to the outer world. Ben, your clarity around, in essence, recording without me listening, it changed how we recorded. And you, to some degree, had to really tune in yourself to the outside sounds. It wasn't someone else listening for, like with Nichelle and I was sitting there, and fortunately on the nights the evenings when Nichelle came and recorded, Bear, I think in large measure, was with Ben outside the room, and it allowed me to sort of be that recording engineer for her. But for you didn't really have that. You say that you didn't need to deal with the technical, but on some level, at a certain point, you just kind of took charge of that facet and just kind of accepted, okay, I've got to listen for that airplane or that car or that wind sound or whatever it might be. It's interesting. On a certain level, I would suggest that you didn't so much stop taking on that role. You just took it on in a different way.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, I really did have to transform it. I mean, so much of that initial kind of stepping back was just recreating the space, and that taking a lot of energy, like I had noted. But it's true. I think that there's definitely still a bit of an edge there for me in accepting the kind of leadership that I naturally step into, the kind of director that I am. I think that's
Right.
the other facet of this here too, thinking about my experience and background in filmmaking and what that means to me. It wasn't an issue that these things were going to happen. Airplanes really were the main culprit.
Yeah.
At some point pretty recently to recording, the flight path had changed, right? So the traffic was just unexpectedly way more. And when you are listening in, you go, is this how many airplanes are actually passing over me on a regular basis? But it had shifted. So there was a flow of empowerment. I think those are the words that are really key here, where if I just sat there and read and had the headphones on and could hear something coming, then I could say, gotta stop, gotta wait. And that came from a very deep place. It wasn't narrating. Ben, excuse me, this is Martin. There's an airplane now coming in. I'm going to use a phrase that you just used, Martin, in sharing about the audiobook and the podcast on your Facebook, which I thought was great. You're flying right on the seat of healing and growth.
Right.
That's what I was doing. And the funny thing is, of course, is that it was really literal too, because I'm sitting in a chair, and the best way to get the microphone and everything with the chair was actually me sitting pretty much on the edge of the chair.
Right. Right.
So there really was an embodiment to this.
Right. I've been accused because of, not accused in a sweet way, accused of being someone who flies by the seat of his pants. And there was a time when I think that I'll call criticism had some truth to it, in the sense that flying by the seat of my pants meant that I per se wasn't prepared. And I would suggest that, despite the fact that we might or likely would have done the audiobook differently if we could do it again today, I still feel very clear that we were prepared in the way that we knew to be prepared, and that ultimately there's a difference between being at the edge of one's seat versus flying by the seat of one's pants, that there's the degree of presence, the degree of embodied practice that came with the process was, as I look back on it, I experience it with a high degree of joy. I don't look back with, per se, regret over, oh, well, if we had recorded this way, or if we had done this way. I look back at it and I go, okay, we're now doing a lot of those different ways in how we're delivering podcasts. But on the other hand, there's like this recognition that, wow, with just a willingness to engage in practice, we all produced an audiobook. We're now producing a podcast. And we're doing it without audio engineers. And that's not to say their value isn't important to a lot of individuals. It's the recognition that with a willingness to go for it, just about anything in this world can be done if we're willing to be at the edge of our seats and engaged. I'm curious, what was that experience for you, Nichelle, in the actual production?
Well, I think you all captured quite a bit of it. I just want to go back to Ben's statement about being on the edge of the seat. As soon as you said that, you took me right back, right? Like to leaning in, making sure the voice was captured around the makeshift. I don't even know what that's called. Was it like a blanket or a tarp, something to
Yeah.
keep the sound flowing in?
Yeah.
That was so clearly stated. I do want to also mention that the reason why it was so safe for me to be vulnerable in that setting was because there were no sound engineers. There was no one there saying, oh, you got to do it again. You all just said, okay, talk, practice. You gave me the guardrails, like listen out for sounds, make sure you don't hit something because this particular mic picked up a lot of sound, but you really created a safe space for us in the process. And then I think it was you, Ben, who just mentioned the flow of empowerment. And you're spot on with that. And my empowerment came from a different place. And that is of, again, being comfortable reading something that I didn't write, but that really resonated with me. And also stepping into something that I just never imagined that I would do. Even in the process of preparing, of reading the vignettes beforehand, I was embodying practice. I was reflecting on my life, on my experiences. It was a healing process just to read the vignette. It's been healing to read portions of the book. It's healing to share the book with others. This conversation in and of itself, it's healing. So this process has given me the opportunity to step into healing spaces in a more authentic and practical way than I probably would have if I were trying to be intentional, right? I would have forced it and tried to set aside time and space, and I would have been really rigid about it. But in doing it in this manner, I felt like I was able to make a contribution and also work on myself. So that's the part that I truly appreciated in this process and being on the edge. Yeah.
Yeah, that imagery of being at the edge of the seat. Thank you so much for sharing that, Nichelle. It also speaks to a willingness on both of your parts to kind of step into the unknown. There's a quality of the unknown when we endeavor upon something that we've never done before, and all three of us ventured forth into that sense of not knowing, of being to some degree uncertain, and being comfortable with the idea that I don't know, and yet it's okay that I don't know. I'm kind of curious, are there other examples in your life where that kind of informed you about what it means to be taking steps that you've never taken before, right?
I see almost every day as one of those situations where um, I may not know what's going to happen, every moment almost. And there was a time in my life when everything had to be planned and scripted and organized and structured down to the minute, drop off the kids at this time, get to work at this time, get home at this time, make the dinner at this time. Everything was just so structured. And now that my life is less structured, there are a lot of unknowns. And with those unknowns, I find that I am being way more flexible and taking opportunities to step into things that are not known. And that's at a general level. I guess in a more specific level, it's no secret to you, Martin and Ben, that, I've recovered from a pretty serious illness. And with that, there are a lot of physical unknowns about what my physical abilities are going to be. And even now, it's been 12 years, I think, since I've recovered. There are times when I will have sensations and feelings that are, that take me back to the time when I was ill, and it makes me wonder. I feel like I'm not sure what's going to happen. Am I sick again? And what I've tried to do is to really live in the present and to avoid the worry. I will pray, I will meditate, and it really settles me. And I will say, to tie it back to the recording, it was the same way for me. Driving from Rockville, Maryland over to Upper Marlboro in the evening to do the recording, I had excitement and some anxiety about, what if I do it wrong? What if my voice is not the voice that is needed? And I just had to let go. And that's what I'm learning, to be flexible, to let go, and to let it be what it's going to be, and to trust the process.
So well said. Let go and just trust the process. And at times, if necessary, keep practicing. And if you need to, do it again. We were kind of fortunate in the sense that because it was a first time experience for me in being an audio engineer, there have been several moments where I thought, oh, geez, am I going to need to come back to Ben and to Nichelle and say, okay, we need to re-record this whole thing. I'm not sure that I'm struggling with this, and I'm trying to get these qualities out of the sound and working with it, and not being a professional engineer. There's been quite the learning curve, but ultimately there was a path and it opened up, and I'm deeply grateful for that. So thank you, both of you. It's been such a joy sharing this and kind of reminiscing about our experience together in the form of a podcast about the audiobook. And I'm just really grateful to both you, Nichelle, and to you, Ben, for your amazing contributions.
It's my pleasure, Marty. It's been quite a learning experience for me, amateur sound engineers and doing all this legwork in the background. It's really been enlightening to let me know that there a whole lot more goes into this work than one would imagine. So I appreciate the opportunity to learn and the opportunity to contribute. And Ben, it was just a pleasure working with you. And you've been so encouraging along the way through the interviews, even through the readings. It's just been really cool to have this experience with both of you. So I'm grateful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. So with that, the audiobook, where can you get it? It's available now on Audible, audiobooks.com. Some library systems are starting to populate it through Hoopla. Martin's website, martinperkins.com, is also a location where you can purchase a copy. That's going to be the best way to support this process, what we're doing. That money is going to go directly into our pockets in terms of getting to do more stuff with the podcast or just life in general, just a little pocket change in that way. As of this recording, we are not on Spotify and Apple audiobooks yet. That is in process. So again, down the line, do double check if those are your preferred platforms for audiobooks. And with that, until next time,